had some strange pet-sitting experiences over the years, but there's one I can never forget. I've told this story to friends, family, even other pet sitters, and they all say the same thing. How on earth did you stay there all night? And to be honest, I don't know. So it all started when I picked up this last-minute pet-sitting job. A guy named Mr. Leary had posted on a local app looking for someone to watch his dog overnight. Simple, right? But there was a catch. He wanted me to stay in his house. I arrive at this place and it's weird from the start. The house is this giant, old Victorian, just off the main road in a small town I didn't know very well. I knocked and this middle-aged guy opens the door. He looked stressed and his eyes were kind of shifty, like he'd been up for days. He rushed me inside, showed me around quickly, and kept glancing at the stairs, muttering something about time running out. At this point, I was already uneasy, but I figured, maybe he was just worried about leaving his pet. So we get to the part of the house where I'd be staying, and he introduces me to Max. Max was strange. He was this small, scruffy-looking terrier, but he had the most intense human-like eyes. You ever see a dog look at you like they know what you're thinking? That was Max. And the thing is, his eyes didn't just look at me. They followed me, no matter where I moved. Before leaving, Mr. Leary gave me some quick instructions. "Make sure Max stays in the living room," he said, almost in a whisper. "He's sensitive to certain areas of the house." Sensitive? To rooms? It was weird, but okay. I'd keep him in the living room, no problem. The first hour was pretty uneventful. Max lay on the couch, just watching me. I tried petting him, but he'd pull away, almost like he was offended by the idea. Then, around midnight, things started getting strange. I was scrolling through my phone when I heard this faint scratching sound. It was soft at first, coming from upstairs. I glanced at Max, but he didn't seem fazed, so I brushed it off as the house settling or maybe a branch hitting a window. But then it got louder, more insistent, like something or someone was trying to claw their way out. I sat there, heart pounding, telling myself it was nothing. But Max was staring at the staircase now, his whole body tense. I was debating whether to check it out when the scratching stopped. And then I heard a soft, eerie creak, like a door opening slowly. Max's fur was standing straight up, and he was growling low. I tried to calm him, but his eyes wouldn't leave the stairs. Against my better judgment, I grabbed a flashlight and started walking up. As I reached the top, I realized that the scratching had come from the last door on the right. The door was open just a crack, but enough to see that the room was pitch black. I was debating turning back when I felt this icy draft, and my hand started shaking. But then I heard it, a faint voice like a whisper, from behind that door. It sounded like a child's voice saying, "Max, come and find me." I stood there, frozen. Max? Who was calling for Max? The house was supposed to be empty. I ran back downstairs, hoping that I'd imagined it all. But Max was sitting there, staring at me, almost expectantly, like he knew exactly what I'd just heard. The smart thing to do would have been to leave, but I didn't want to let Mr. Leary down, or abandon Max. So I sat back on the couch, nervously keeping an eye on the staircase. But then things got weirder. Max started pacing the room in a tight circle, head down, growling in this low, angry way. Then, out of nowhere, he let out this piercing bark and dashed into the kitchen. I followed him in, flipping on the light, and found him standing perfectly still, staring at the fridge. That's when I noticed a photo on the fridge door. It was of a young boy, maybe 6 or 7, sitting on the same couch I'd been on earlier with Max at his feet. I looked closer and my stomach dropped. The boy in the photo, he looked not okay. His skin was pale, almost sickly, and his eyes looked exactly like Max's. I shook my head, trying to brush it off, but the resemblance was eerie. Then I heard that voice again, this time louder. "Max, come upstairs." My skin went ice cold, and Max whined, scratching at the fridge door as if he wanted to get inside. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and I felt a rush of cold air sweep through the room. I grabbed Max, holding him close, as the house seemed to groan around us. There was this feeling, this presence, and I swear it was watching us. Then footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps coming down the stairs, closer and closer. I held my breath, clutching Max when the footsteps stopped right outside the kitchen door. I couldn't bring myself to look, but I felt it, a presence just standing there. Then I heard it again, a voice whispering, "Why won't you play with me?" I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would go away. After a few moments, I opened them, and the footsteps were gone. The house fell silent again, but Max was still trembling, staring at the kitchen doorway. I stayed up the rest of the night, too scared to sleep, keeping every light in the room on. Max eventually curled up next to me, still tense but finally closing his eyes. I felt like I was safe as long as he was next to me. When the sun finally rose, I called Mr. Leary, telling him he needed to come home as soon as possible. He arrived a few hours later, looking as pale and exhausted as when I first met him. I told him about the noises, the whispers, the footsteps, and all he did was sigh. "That was my son," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "He passed away last year. Max hasn't been the same since." My heart sank as he explained how his son had loved to play hide-and-seek with Max, how they'd run around the house, laughing and playing until they were both worn out. Since the boy's death, Max had become restless, always looking for him, always pacing and whining like he couldn't understand why his best friend was gone. After that night, I couldn't look at pet sitting the same way again. Every now and then I think about Max, about that haunted look in his eyes, and I wonder, is he still waiting, still searching for someone who's never coming back? I'll be honest, I've done a lot of pet sitting over the years, and it's usually fun and easy. Feed the pets, take them outside, play with them a bit, and maybe earn a little cash. But last year I had a job that changed how I felt about pet sitting. Forever. It was an old, charming house, the kind with creaky floors and big windows that seemed to watch you wherever you went. The couple who hired me were nice, and they had 2 pets, a fluffy gray cat named Oliver and a small, scrappy dog called Leo. Easy enough, right? But as soon as they left, things got strange. Now, the first night was mostly uneventful, but something about that house just felt off. Every floorboard creak sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind rattling the windows gave me chills. But hey, it's an old house. I tried to shrug it off. But on the second night, things got weirder. It was late, around midnight, and I was getting ready to turn in for the night. I had just let Leo out for a final bathroom break when I heard scratching sounds coming from the back door. I opened it, expecting Leo to be ready to come in, but he wasn't there. No Leo, just the dark yard stretching out, the tall trees rustling in the wind. My heart started pounding. I called his name, but he didn't come. Suddenly, I heard a noise from behind me. I whipped around, and there he was, sitting by the door, staring right at me as if he'd never left the house. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. I locked the doors and double-checked the windows, just to feel safe. But that night, as I lay on the couch, I started hearing faint scratching sounds again, this time from the hallway. At first, I thought it was Oliver. But when I got up to check, Oliver was fast asleep on the windowsill, his eyes closed. The scratching grew louder, almost desperate, coming from near the floor. I turned on the hall light and saw muddy paw prints leading from the front door, down the hallway, and stopping right at my feet. Leo was curled up in his bed, fast asleep, and Oliver hadn't moved an inch. But those paw prints, dark, muddy, and impossibly large, just ended right there, at the edge of the hallway, as if whatever had left them had just vanished. I cleaned them up, my mind racing. I tried to tell myself it was some kind of prank or something I'd missed when I first came in, but I knew it wasn't. The next night, I was ready to put this whole creepy week behind me. Just one more night of feeding Oliver and Leo, one last late-night walk, and I'd be done. But as I got Leo's leash, the lights in the hallway flickered, and the scratching started again, this time louder, almost frantic. I turned around and the paw prints were back, this time leading from the basement door. My heart felt like it was about to beat out of my chest. I wasn't about to go down there, not with whatever was making those noises. So I backed away, hoping to avoid whatever was waiting. But as I turned to leave, Leo started barking, staring straight at the basement door. Oliver, meanwhile, had vanished from his usual spot. I didn't know what else to do, so I grabbed Leo and put him in his carrier, hoping he'd be safe there. Then I looked down and saw new paw prints this time heading toward the front door. I reached for the door, wanting nothing more than to leave, but it wouldn't budge. It was like something had locked it from the outside. Suddenly, I felt this icy breath on the back of my neck and heard the faintest whisper, like someone muttering just inches behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. Just empty air, Leo whimpering from his carrier, and Oliver watching me from the staircase, his eyes glowing in the dark. That was it. I threw my things together, grabbed both pets, and bolted. The moment I stepped outside, the scratching stopped. The house just fell silent as if nothing had ever happened. The next day, I told the owners what I could about the paw prints, the noises, but they just laughed it off, saying their house had a few quirks. But every now and then, when I see Leo and Oliver around town, I can't help but wonder if that house still holds whatever had been scratching from the basement, leaving those muddy paw prints that just stopped. I've always loved animals. Growing up, I'd pet sit for all the neighbors, dogs, cats, birds, even a lizard once. I was the go-to pet sitter. It was easy money, and who wouldn't want to hang out with pets all day? But there was this one pet-sitting gig that still creeps me out to this day. It was the summer before college, and I'd been asked to take care of a dog, Max, and a black cat, Shadow, at the Jenkins house. Now, the Jenkins were a little eccentric, to say the least. Their house was huge, old, and filled with all kinds of antique furniture and paintings that always seemed to watch you. But hey, they paid well, and I thought, how hard could it be? So I'd go over every evening to feed Max and Shadow, let them out, and make sure everything was okay. The first few nights were fine, mostly me and Max hanging out while Shadow just stared at me from across the room. But on the third night, things started getting weird. I was in the kitchen, filling Max's bowl, when I heard a scratching sound coming from the basement door. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, like something was trying to get out. I figured maybe Shadow had gotten trapped down there, so I walked over and opened the door. But as soon as I did, the scratching stopped, and there was nothing but darkness at the bottom of the stairs. I called out, "Shadow?" But there was no answer, just silence, heavy and almost watchful. I closed the door, trying to shake off the chill running down my spine, and went back to finish feeding the pets. But as I turned around, I noticed Shadow was already in the living room, sitting right there, watching me. I laughed it off, thinking maybe I was just hearing things. But after that night, the scratching sound started up every time I went over there, always coming from the basement. One night, I finally decided to check it out. I grabbed a flashlight, took a deep breath, and started down those creaky stairs. The air got colder as I went down, and a damp, musty smell filled the space. The basement was cluttered with old boxes, stacks of dusty newspapers, and furniture covered in sheets. I was halfway across the room when I heard it again, a soft scratching, this time coming from an old cabinet in the corner. My heart was pounding, but I walked over to the cabinet, flashlight shaking in my hand. I reached out and slowly opened the door. And inside was nothing. Just some cobwebs and a few old books. No sign of Shadow or Max or anything that could have made that noise. As I turned to leave, though, I heard a faint whisper, like someone was standing right behind me, saying, "You're not alone." I bolted up those stairs faster than I've ever run in my life, slamming the door shut behind me. Max was sitting by the door, looking at me like I was the crazy one. Shadow was nowhere to be found. For the rest of that night, every little sound made me jump, but the scratching had finally stopped. The next day, I told myself I must have imagined it, that it was just the wind or something brushing against the house. But on my last night pet-sitting, things took an even stranger turn. I was walking down the hallway, checking on Max and Shadow before I left, when I noticed a light coming from the basement. That didn't make sense. I'd turned off all the lights, and the Jenkins had left instructions not to touch anything down there. I called out, half expecting one of the Jenkins to have come home early, but there was no answer. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened the basement door and looked down. The light was coming from that same old cabinet in the corner, its door hanging slightly open. My whole body felt frozen, but I couldn't leave without checking it out. I crept down the steps, step by step, my flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. When I reached the cabinet, I saw a tiny, flickering candle inside, like someone had just been there. And then, as I stood there, I heard that whisper again, this time right next to my ear. "You're not welcome here." I whipped around, but the basement was empty. I didn't wait to find out who or what was talking to me. I ran up those stairs, grabbed my stuff, and left the house as fast as I could. The next day, I called Mrs. Jenkins to let her know I'd finished the pet sitting. I tried to ask casually if anyone else had a key to the house, hoping to explain what happened. She just laughed, saying, "Oh, no one goes into that basement. Not since Mr. Jenkins heard voices down there years ago and locked it up for good." I didn't have the heart to tell her about the scratching or the candle,